Hey guys, tonight we're stepping barefoot onto cool alabaster floors, winding through jasmine-scented corridors that stretch deep into the heart of Ramses' royal palace. The oil lamps flicker softly, their shadows dancing like silent performers across gold-leafed pillars. Somewhere in the distance, a harp whispers a gentle tune, maybe a lullaby for the pharaoh's newborn, or a secret signal between jealous queens. You're not in a museum. You're in the court of Ramses the Great. And no, you definitely wouldn't survive here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are, and where in the world are you listening from? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take slow steps down a corridor of polished white stone, and in that moment, as if time has paused, you're somewhere else entirely. No alarms, no emails, just the soft footfall of servants and the faint trickle of water through clay pipes. You haven't seen Ramses yet, but you feel him. He's in the resin sweet air, in the silent heat beneath the floors, in the way the guards never turn their heads. At the center of all this is the pulsing heart of an empire, the royal harem. Imagine a space the size of a modern shopping mall, only instead of makeup counters, it's row upon row of gilded chambers, perfumed bath halls, and braids long enough to dust the floor. Every woman here, whether queen, consort, or concubine, has been handpicked, trained to know exactly when to laugh, when to cry, and when to deliver a whispered phrase that could topple a dynasty. And you're the only one who gets to hear it all tonight. The ancient Egyptians didn't really have a word for polygamy, as we understand it. For them, the great wife was sacred. But the pharaoh's many marriages weren't just allowed, they were expected. Politics didn't just happen in war rooms or temples, it happened in bed, at fruit-laden feasts, between perfume and pillow talk. Ramses II, who ruled for over 60 years, had at least 8 known wives, and probably dozens more. But only one held the title of Great Royal Wife. The one bold enough to stand beside him in temple carvings. You see, this wasn't love. This was branding. It was diplomacy. It was a power play with eyeliner. Remember the sunscreen made of crocodile poop? These people were inventive. Ramses used marriage like a Swiss army knife. Marrying a Hittite princess? That meant troops were now off limits in that region. Unless you wanted awkward dinner conversations. Wives weren't lovers. They were treaties, trophies, signals of war, or peace. Historians still debate whether Ramses truly loved any of his wives, or whether he was just really good at pretending. One letter from a Hittite bride described being treated like a goddess, but also mentioned nightly ritual obligations. Sounds romantic, until you realize diplomacy came with a sleep schedule. And then there's the question, how does one man remember all his women? Ramses had a system. Scholars believe each wife wore a distinct perfume blend, a signature mix of oil and herbs only she used. Walk into a room, take a deep breath, and he'd know exactly who was waiting. Scent, in this palace, was a password. You don't just walk through the harem. You learn how to move. Every sound, a rustle of linen, bangles clinking, a sigh behind silk, carries meaning. It could be the chosen wife for the night, or someone realizing they weren't chosen. In this place, attention is currency. Imagine living your whole life waiting for a single glance. And if you didn't get it, you faded. Or if you were smarter, you made sure you couldn't be ignored. Some women, like Nefertari, stood out instantly. But most lived in shadow, and shadows are where the real schemes begin. Here's a little-known truth: some of these wives were literate. They wrote poems, prayers, and sometimes curses, folded into papyrus scrolls and slipped into the knee cushions presented to Ramses. You heard that right. Love notes and poison threats, tucked beneath silk and feathers. Romance in the ancient world had layers. No one leaves the harem easily. Even when sent home, you remain a threat. You've heard too much. Seen too much. Women like that were usually married off, or disappeared. You pause. Inhale. Resin, stone dust, lotus blossoms, and something else. Maybe time itself. You're not sure where in the story you are anymore. But clearly, you're no longer an outsider. You've entered the palace. And the palace doesn't let go easily. You haven't slept. Not really. Because even after the lights dimmed in your mind and the marble floors cooled beneath your feet, something kept humming in the background, like the low buzz of a mosquito that only royalty can hear. Maybe it's the scent of cardamom still clinging to your fingertips. Or the way one of the servant girls glanced sideways at you before vanishing behind a curtain. Like she knew something. Like she knew you knew nothing. And in this place, ignorance is more dangerous than any blade. Tonight you wander deeper into the palace. Past the painted columns and soft laughter. Past the bronze bowls of figs left untouched. And finally, through a veil of linen, you arrive in the heart of the pharaoh's private world. This is the Hall of the Great Wives. You were expecting, maybe 4 or 5 women? That would already feel excessive. But no, your eyes widen as you realize the pharaoh collected wives like rare coins. At least 8 official ones, each chosen for a reason: beauty, politics, prophecy, or timing. And beyond them? Dozens, even hundreds of consorts and lesser wives. Some were daughters of noble families, bribes in silk. Others, foreign princesses sent as peace offerings. A few? Mere dancers whose swaying hips accidentally caught the pharaoh's attention. That's all it took. A glance. A moment. A legacy. But there's an order to this chaos. A silent hierarchy, as invisible as the incense smoke that coils around the painted ceilings. At the top, of course, is the great royal wife. She's the anchor, the face beside Ramses in every temple frieze, the co-ruler in matters sacred and secular. Her name is carved in stone, her image depicted with the same scale as the king's. She is seen. She is feared. And usually, she is hated. Because being the queen in a room full of queens is not glamorous. It's gladiatorial. You sense it immediately. The way the other wives smile at her, their lips tight and brittle. The small, synchronized bows. The careful silence. Everyone here is playing a part in a drama that's been running for decades, long before you arrived. And you realize, this isn't a love story. It's a reality show with no elimination round. There's Canute, proud and political, rumored to have the ear of the temple priests. There's Isetnofret, beautiful and calculating, who bore Ramses his heir and never lets anyone forget it. There's Bintenath, a daughter-wife, yeah, that happened, whose presence alone turns every room colder. And then there's Nefertari. But she's not here. Not tonight. Still, you feel her shadow. Everyone does. Even now, decades after her death, the others live in a palace that still bears her perfume, her furniture, her statues. Her memory haunts this place like the scent of blue lotus. More than a wife, she was a brand. And no one, not even Ramses himself, has managed to erase her entirely. Historians still argue whether Nefertari truly held political power, or if her fame is simply the result of tomb murals and poetic license. But you can't help but notice how often her name is spoken here, in whispers. That's usually a sign someone mattered. There's an older servant in the corner. You barely noticed her. She's folding linens in neat little stacks, hands working with the kind of calm precision that says, "I've seen everything, and I'm still here." You almost don't hear her when she mutters under her breath, "Being first doesn't mean being last." You pretend not to hear it. That's what people do in this place. Everyone hears everything. But no one listens. In the harem, rank is everything. There's an actual ledger, an ancient spreadsheet if you will, where each woman is recorded titled classified. There's the king's beloved, the sole ornament, the songstress of the interior chamber. You start to wonder if one of them was ever called wife with best timing, or most consistent eyeliner. And though it sounds bureaucratic, these titles came with real privileges: better rooms, better food, better chances. In a palace of wives, you don't just want love, you want legacy. You want a son. Because the real game? The real game is succession. At this point, you're starting to understand that Ramses didn't just marry for fun. Each wife was a bet, a wager placed on diplomacy, loyalty, fertility, and strategy. And Pharaoh? He was the dealer. But even he had favorites. You catch wind of it in the stories told by servants. One wife who was granted a private bath garden, perfumed with imported myrrh. Another who once wore a diadem only reserved for goddesses. The rumor that Ramses whispered secrets only to the one who braided his hair by moonlight. Some say he fell for cleverness. Others claim he was ruled by beauty. But the truth? The truth is whispered in the dark, from mouth to mouth, like an heirloom of words. The pharaoh doesn't love. He selects. You sit for a while in one of the side chambers. The cushions are soft, but the air is heavy. There's tension here. Unspoken, but pressing. The kind that creeps under your skin like humidity. Someone plays a harp in the distance. The tune is gentle, almost lullaby-like. But you notice, every few notes, it stumbles. Not by mistake. By design. A signal. A warning. Someone's watching. Someone's listening. And someone's not happy with how the hierarchy is shifting. You stand. The cushion exhales as you rise, as if relieved. The hall of the great wives is still behind you. But its games? Its whispers? They follow. Because in Ramses' court, no love is simple, and no title is safe. Not even if your name is etched in gold. You wander past the columns painted with lilies and papyrus, past murals of Ramses smiting enemies while 30 wives smile politely from the background. The air changes. It's warmer here, thicker. There's a fragrance that clings to your throat like honey left too long in the sun, sweet, heady, almost too much. And then you see her. Not in person. Not yet. But her presence is painted in color on every wall, embroidered in linen, carved into ivory. She's smiling in every mural like she knows something you don't. Nefertari. Even the name tastes like perfume when you whisper it. She was the great wife, yes. But more than that, she was Ramses' chosen wife. The one whose tomb is still praised today not just for its art, but its intimacy. The one whose eyes look out from painted ceilings as if she's still waiting for you to kneel. You take a step forward. And suddenly, you're not in the hallway anymore. You're in a memory. It begins, as these things often do, with a gaze. Ramses isn't Pharaoh yet. Not quite. He's still the crown prince, still learning to hold a crook and flail without looking like he's compensating. And she's barely more than a girl, a priest's daughter with eyes too clever and silence too calm. He sees her at a temple festival. The story goes, she doesn't bow. Not quickly, at least. She meets his eyes. And smiles like she knows something that makes him uncomfortable. That's it. That's the beginning. Within months, she's part of the palace. Not yet the great wife, but close. A consort, officially. But unofficially? She's everywhere. Sitting too close during feasts. Whispering into his ear during meetings. Somehow knowing the names of every servant in the corridor. The other wives notice. So do the guards. She's learning. Watching. Cataloging everything. And Ramses? Ramses starts repeating her words like they were his. Historians still debate the extent of Nefertari's power. Some say she merely inspired. Others believe she advised in politics, strategy, even diplomacy. But the records are suggestive. She traveled with Ramses, often. She was depicted the same size as him in carvings. She wrote in hieroglyphs, a privilege few women held. One letter, preserved in papyrus, signed in her own hand, pleads for peace between Egypt and a Nubian tribe, using diplomatic language so precise it still puzzles translators today. You're starting to get the picture. Nefertari wasn't just smart. She was dangerous in the most exquisite way. One little-known detail. Nefertari had her own apartments, far from the other wives. Not just separate chambers, but a full villa on the edge of the palace complex, with its own garden, pool, and priestly staff. It was rare. Unheard of, really. But no one questioned it, not while Ramses still visited her every night, sometimes leaving the main harem before dusk, his sandals kicking up dust that dared not land on her doorstep. The others whispered. Of course they did. Whispers are currency. Some said she enchanted him. Others said she fed him charms, or even slipped honey laced with blue lotus into his wine. There was a rumor that her voice could calm crocodiles. That she once stopped a court execution with a single sentence. All of it nonsense, probably. But when you're the favorite, even silence becomes a weapon. You pause in her old garden now, rebuilt, restored, still half wild. The water channel trickles gently, lined with faded tiles. There's a bench where she used to sit, watching lotus flowers drift across the pond like dreams she wasn't ready to chase. You sit there too. Close your eyes. And you almost hear it, the soft rustle of linen, the way her anklets would click gently as she moved, the low laugh she saved for moments when Ramses said something foolish. Which, let's face it, might have been often. They say Ramses gave her everything. That her tomb was the most elaborate ever made for a queen. That he inscribed it with poems. Real poems. Not just titles or prayers, but love verses. One goes, "My love for you is eternal, like the stars that shine upon the Nile." Ah. And yes, maybe he had other wives. Maybe dozens. But none of the others got poetry carved in stone. None of the others got temples where their names were spoken beside the gods. Nefertari wasn't just queen. She was beloved. But being beloved? That's a liability in a room full of ambition. And you begin to notice it now, the subtle edits in the murals. A chisel mark where her name once was. A servant's awkward silence when asked about her death. The way certain records end. You see, Nefertari disappears from court records a little over 2 decades into Ramses' reign. No drama. No fanfare. Just gone. Her tomb was finished. Her temple consecrated. And she was laid to rest beneath a ceiling of golden stars. And yet, some believe she didn't die naturally. That her illness was convenient. That her last months were isolated, her visits limited, her name whispered less. Others say she died of a broken heart, lonely even as she lived in luxury, surrounded by rivals, watched by servants who never really served. Historians still argue over it. No evidence. Just speculation. Which, in ancient Egypt, is about as good as fact. You rise from the bench. Her presence lingers. Like incense. Like memory. And as you walk back into the corridor, you notice something strange. All the other wives? They're still vying for power. Still fighting over sons and titles and scented bath oils. But Nefertari? She's already won. Even in death. Even now. Especially now. You wake, if you ever slept at all, to the sound of laughter muffled by sandstone and silk. Not joyous laughter. Not even polite. This is the kind of laughter that ends in a pause. The kind that waits for someone else to respond, or flinch. You pull aside a curtain and step into the long hall that snakes past the living quarters. Every surface here is soft, pillows, rugs, voices. But the tension is sharp enough to cut papyrus. This is where the real war happens. Not with armies. Not with horses or chariots. But with looks held a second too long, compliments wrapped around insults, and bedroom doorways left open just wide enough to suggest things never spoken aloud. Welcome to the inner chambers, the land of pillow talk, and the battleground of rumors. The room you pass is barely lit, save for the moonlight pooling through the lattice windows. In it, a young wife whispers into the ear of a servant boy. She's giggling, but the servant isn't laughing. His eyes are fixed on the wall, where a small niche contains a figurine of the goddess Hathor. A witness. You try not to listen. But of course you do. She was crying again last night. The one who used to get the purple grapes. Pause. I hear the pharaoh hasn't called her in a month. Another pause. Then, maybe someone should bring her a message. Or something sweeter. The servant boy blinks, nods, disappears. This is how it starts. In the royal harem, love is a currency, but it devalues quickly. Affection turns into attention. Attention into routine. Routine into silence. And silence? That's when the games begin. Because here's the truth no one paints on the temple walls. You can lose the pharaoh's favor as quickly as you gain it. One wrong word. One gray hair. One night when he forgets your name. So, what do? You make sure he remembers you. One wife starts wearing a rare oil, harvested from myrrh trees planted only in Thebes. Another learns a foreign song, a lullaby Ramses supposedly heard as a child. A third arranges for a white dove to land outside his chamber every morning, trained to coo just as he opens his eyes. Creepy? Maybe. Effective? Very. But when those don't work, when the perfumes go unnoticed and the doves get shooed away, you dig deeper. That's when the rumors begin. You hear one now, just drifting through the lattice. She's been bleeding for too many moons. They say she talks to herself in Nubian. Loudly. Her son stutters. A curse, perhaps? whispers as weapons. And the most dangerous ones? They aren't false. They're half-true. Historians still argue over how much influence the wives had in shaping succession, whether their rivalries truly impacted who got the crown, or just the drama behind the scenes. But here's a fact: more than one son mysteriously lost favor after his mother fell out of fashion. Coincidence? Ancient Egypt doesn't do coincidence. There's a truth that rarely gets mentioned in scrolls or documentaries. Every bedroom in this palace is a stage. And every performance is calculated. The way the wives decorate their sleeping quarters. Strategic. A painting of Hathor for fertility. A scent of blue lotus to evoke memory. A curtain left open to show just a bit of skin when Ramses passes by. Accidentally. And when that fails? A carefully chosen mistake. One wife famously pretended to burn herself with hot oil. The pharaoh visited her that night, twice. Another collapsed dramatically in the gardens during a procession, just as Ramses walked by. A miracle! The gods had sent her a vision! Or a twisted ankle. Either way, she was back in favor for at least a week. But it's not just the wives playing the game. The servants are involved. So are the guards, the priests, even the food tasters. There's a whole economy of information. Who got invited where? Who wore which necklace? Whose room was lit after sunset? You see it now in the way a maid adjusts the folds of a linen robe, too carefully, too slowly, so that you notice the bruises beneath it. Or the way a platter of figs is placed outside one door, but not another. Symbols. Signals. Status updates, ancient style. There's a story few people know, about a wife named Tabira. She wasn't royal. She wasn't beautiful. What she had was timing. She figured out, somehow, that Ramses liked silence after his battles. No music. No speeches. No flattery. Just quiet. So, one night, when he returned from quelling a rebellion in Kush, she was waiting, not dressed in finery, but sitting quietly, grinding herbs in a mortar, as if she hadn't heard the trumpets. He watched her for a moment. Said nothing. Sat beside her. They say he stayed the night. And the next. And for a full month afterward she had her own bath drawn, her own chamber, her own servants. Then? One morning she was gone. No explanation. No farewell. Her room emptied before sunset. Her name scratched lightly from the ledger. What happened? No one knows. Or, more accurately, everyone knows, but no one tells. Because in Ramses' court, the only thing more dangerous than failing is rising too fast. You drift now between chamber doors, each one like a book you're afraid to open. A soft cry behind one. Laughter behind another. Silence behind a third. And behind them all, stories stitched with moonlight and power, soaked in jealousy, perfumed with desperation. The wives of Ramses II didn't just share a husband. They shared a throne made of shifting sands. And every night, they tried not to sink. You don't know when it started, but somewhere between the harp music and the hushed arguments behind silk drapes, you begin to realize something. The harem isn't just a place for romance. It's a senate. A chessboard. A war room with better cushions. Politics doesn't stop at the palace gate. It starts in the perfumed corridors of Ramses' court. And tonight you're walking into the invisible parliament of Egypt, where laws are bent, alliances are brokered, and every favor smells faintly of rosewater and ambition. You hear the women before you see them. Not yelling. Not whispering either. They're mid-conversation, mid-negotiation, their words lilting like music and daggers at the same time. You peek through a linen partition. It's a gathering of 3 wives, none of them first rank, but all shrewd. One is braiding another's hair, but make no mistake, this is business. You'll speak to the priest tomorrow? The youngest asks. If he accepts the gift, the older replies, tightening the braid slightly. He'll speak on our behalf at the ceremony. And the oil shipment from Memphis? A nod. Already en route. Courtesy of our dear friend from the temple kitchen. These women aren't decorating themselves, they're decorating plans. In a place where the pharaoh's attention is the ultimate prize, and the throne's next occupant could depend on a kiss or a rumor, every woman plays the long game. They form factions, micro-kingdoms within the palace. Sometimes based on region, Theban wives versus Delta wives. Sometimes by motherhood, mothers of sons versus childless wives. Sometimes, just proximity. The ones whose chambers share a corridor grow close. For warmth. For gossip. For survival. And yes, historians still debate how much of this political behavior was encouraged by Ramses himself. Did he feed the rivalries to maintain control? Or did he prefer a harem so chaotic, none could unite against him? Either way, one thing's clear, the palace wasn't just run by the king. It ran on the whispers of the women behind him. You sit quietly in a shadowed corner, pretending to admire the architecture. And you hear everything. Plans to influence festival processions. Who gets to be present at the next temple ceremony? Which servant was bribed to place an accidentally opened scroll on the pharaoh's seat? It's exhausting, really. You start wondering if Ramses ever got a moment of genuine peace, or if every massage, every feast, every foot bath was part of someone's pitch. And then you remember the structure of the court. The women weren't just wives. They were diplomats. Foreign brides brought treaties with them. A Mitanni princess? That meant no war in Syria, at least for a few seasons. A Hittite wife? That sealed the peace after the Battle of Kadesh, one of the bloodiest standoffs in ancient Near Eastern history. And when those brides came to Egypt, they didn't come alone. They brought translators, guards, maids, and sometimes instructions. You are to remind the pharaoh of our generosity. You are to request tribute in exchange for peace. You are to watch. Yes. Some were spies. Even the food they served, the stories they told, some were designed to gather intelligence, to test Egypt's strengths and weaknesses. And in return, they received gold, land, sometimes even temples built in their names. It was politics under the bedcovers. There's a curious fact that often gets left out of textbooks. The wives may have known more about military plans than the generals. Why? Because Ramses, despite all his power, or maybe because of it, talked most openly at night. After feasts. After wine. After trust, whether real or feigned, had been established. One scroll describes how a wife once advised Ramses not to take a particular fortress because it was bad luck. She cited a dream. He listened. That fortress remained unconquered for years. Some say he feared her prophecy. Others say she was just smarter than his advisors. No one talks about that wife today. But the fortress? Still there. Back in the present, you watch a small group of wives share a plate of dates. But they're not eating. They're placing the dates. One in a triangle. One in a row. One in the center. It looks meaningless, but it's not. It's code. Every servant in the palace has learned to read subtle signs. Fruit arrangements. Color combinations in robes. Which incense is burning. It's a language beneath language, a whole dialect of danger. And right now, someone's plotting something. You walk past a mural showing Ramses standing tall, his arms open, embracing all of Egypt. But now you know. He's not the only one ruling. Behind the throne, beside the throne, in the cushions, in the courtyards, there's an empire run on perfume, poetry, and politics. Where no one raises a sword. Just eyebrows. And where pillow talk isn't pillow talk. It's policy. You've been in this palace long enough now to know that the air shifts with intention. A breeze through the lattice screens isn't just weather, it's someone moving somewhere, deciding something. And tonight, that breeze carries the faint echo of sandals in a hurry, of a boy calling softly for a scribe, and of hushed voices repeating the same name. Kamwasit. You follow the sound through an archway and down a polished hallway lined with carved lilies. Lamps flicker to life as you pass. The temperature rises, not from the heat outside, but from the pressure in the walls. The stakes here are higher. You've stepped into the section of the palace reserved for the next generation. This is the domain of Ramses' sons. And they are many. Ramses II may have ruled for 66 years, but he didn't rule alone. At any given moment there were princes, dozens of them, training in military arts, temple rituals, and the delicate choreography of not offending their older half-brothers. Estimates vary, but historians believe Ramses fathered over 100 children, some say up to 160. That's not a family tree. That's a forest. And while the daughters were shuffled off into strategic marriages or temple service, the sons dreamed of crowns. The problem was, there could be only one pharaoh. And that's where things got complicated. Because ancient Egypt didn't follow strict primogeniture. The firstborn wasn't always the one who inherited the throne. Succession was fluid, influenced by maternal status, political usefulness, and, most importantly, who survived. Imagine growing up knowing your half-brother's mother once poured wine into your bathwater. Just in case. You pass a small room where two young boys are rehearsing prayers. One stumbles over a word. The other smirks. Not cruelly, but knowingly. They're not just learning hymns. They're learning the rhythm of rivalry. A bit farther on, you reach a chamber larger than the rest. It's lined with shelves of scrolls, model chariots, and faded wooden dolls. A statue of Ptah looms in the corner. This was the private study of Prince Kamwasit, Ramses' fourth son, and according to many, his most brilliant. Not a general. Not a priest. But something between. Kamwasit was an archaeologist before archaeology existed. A scholar. A restorationist. He personally oversaw the repair of ancient tombs and temples that were already old in his own time. He wanted to preserve memory, not just power. But make no mistake, he was a contender, too. Historians still debate whether Kamwasit was ever groomed to be pharaoh. Officially, he wasn't the crown prince for most of Ramses' reign. That role belonged first to Amenhotep, the eldest son of Queen Nefertari. Then to Ramesses II, then to Merneptah. But Kamwasit was present in all the right moments, conducting rituals, restoring tombs, writing inscriptions that subtly mentioned his royal blood. He held the title of High Priest of Ptah, which sounds boring until you realize it meant he basically controlled the entire intellectual and spiritual apparatus of Memphis, one of Egypt's most important cities. Also, people liked him. And that's dangerous in a palace like this. There's a strange little-known detail about Kamwasit. He was obsessed with the past. Not just history, but the idea of continuity. He believed deeply in honoring the dead, all the dead, not just royals. He's credited with reviving forgotten names, restoring tombs that belonged to people who'd been erased by time. You sit on a low stool in his former study now, imagining him bent over a scroll, muttering to himself about crumbling bricks and misaligned hieroglyphs, while other princes flexed muscles and practiced swordplay. There's something almost modern about him, as if he saw the chaos of court life and thought, maybe if I just focus on things that last, I can ignore the rest. But that wasn't really possible, was it? Not when your father is the living God. Not when your brothers are sharpening their smiles. You peek into an adjacent room. More scrolls. More silence. And yet there's tension here. You find a fragment of a letter, copied by a scribe, written in stiff formal Egyptian. I will not contest what is already divine will. Let the blood of his mother speak more loudly than my deeds. It's unsigned. But the implication is clear. Someone, probably Kamwasit, was passed over. And he knew it. By the time Ramses was in his 60s, most of his earlier sons had died. The competition was still fierce, though, because everyone left wanted to be remembered. There's a grim joke that's circulated among Egyptologists. The pharaoh's heir is whoever lasts the longest. In Ramses' case, it was true. His eventual successor, Merneptah, wasn't the eldest or the brightest. He was the most durable. In a palace of venomous smiles and sandal-strap politics, he survived. You pause now, feeling the floor beneath you, a soft rumble, like breath under stone. You're surrounded by ghosts of ambition. Young boys who once wrestled in the garden. Teenagers who memorized prayers by candlelight. Men who stood just behind Ramses in processions, wondering if they'd ever lead the line. And all of them watched each other. All of them calculated their chances, like dice made of bone. No one talks about how lonely it must have been. How frightening to live every day with one foot on the path to the throne, and the other hovering above a pit of forgotten names. And somewhere in this palace, even now, someone is dreaming of a crown. A child, perhaps. One of the pharaoh's final sons. He's practicing how to bow, how to speak, how to wait. Because that's the cruelest thing of all in a royal court. You don't just need power. You need patience. And you need to hope that by the time your moment comes, your mother still matters. It's nearing dawn now. The palace has fallen into that rarest of moods, quiet, but not asleep. The oil lamps have burned low, casting long orange shadows across limestone tiles. The servants whisper a little softer. Even the birds outside hold their breath. And here you are, drifting through a different part of the royal complex. One less talked about. One deliberately left out of the stories. The wing of the daughters. Yes, Ramses had sons, many, ambitious, loud. But the daughters? They were the silk thread that held the tapestry together, or sometimes pulled it apart. Tonight you follow that thread. The room smells of lavender and ink. A servant is brushing down papyrus scrolls with a feather duster, her hands moving like a ritual. You glance at the titles. Not love poetry or religious verse, but trade records. Marriage contracts. Scribe training. And in the center of the room sits a small throne, not golden, not ceremonial. Practical. Worn at the arms. You touch it. And a wave of presence hits you. This is where Ramses' daughters waited, planned, listened, and sometimes acted. You might think of royal daughters as ornamental, draped in linen, learning to sing, waiting to be married off. But not here. Not in Ramses' house. Some of his daughters were powerful, frighteningly so. Take Bintanath, for example. She wasn't just a daughter. She became wife to her own father. Yes. That's not a rumor. Bintanath, whose name meant daughter of the goddess, held the title of great wife late in Ramses' life, after the death of Nefertari and others. And while ancient Egyptian marriage customs were complex and symbolic, there's no denying this union raised eyebrows even in its own time. Historians still debate the nature of the marriage. Was it ritualistic? Political? Literal? But the truth remains, Bintanath was not just a girl with royal blood. She was in the circle. She had her own court, her own staff, her own power base, and her own enemies. That's the thing about being a daughter of Ramses. You're born into a palace of men fighting to inherit a title. You can't inherit it, but you can shape who does. Some daughters became advisors to their brothers. Others became informants to their fathers. One even became high priestess at Hathor's temple, officially religious, unofficially a communications channel between court factions. They were like chess queens on a hidden board, moving diagonally, crossing unexpected paths, impossible to predict. You walk past a painted frieze that shows a line of daughters offering flowers to the gods. But you notice something odd. One of the faces has been scraped off. Deliberate. Erased. There's no name underneath anymore. Just the faint outline of a girl who once mattered. No one remembers which daughter it was, or why her image was removed. Some say she betrayed the pharaoh. Some say she protected him. And some, just a few, say she died in a way that was too embarrassing for the palace to speak of. Either way, her story is gone, buried beneath layers of respectability. Still, you find traces. In jewelry that appears in records, then vanishes. In a linen robe folded carefully in a chest, too fine for a servant, too small for a queen. In notes between scribes mentioning a she, who must not be included. And in all these little silences, the truth emerges. The daughters knew everything. They saw the rivalries. They heard the secrets. They played parts in conversations their brothers never even knew were happening. One lesser-known daughter, Nefertari, actually ruled as a kind of deputy queen during one of Ramses' campaigns. She stood in for her father at court ceremonies, addressed temple officials, and may have even issued minor decrees. That's not decoration. That's governance. And yet, when Ramses returned, she slipped back into the background, like a hand withdrawing into a sleeve. You wonder, did she resent it? Did she miss the power? Or was she relieved to return to the shadows? History doesn't say. But the way her statues were carved, with open eyes and hands at her sides, makes you think, maybe she chose her moments. That's what royal daughters had to do. And behind all of it? The mothers. Because each daughter was also a weapon in her mother's arsenal. Married off when useful. Kept close when dangerous. Daughters were strategic assets, like scented scrolls or sacrificial goats. It's cold. But in the world of Ramses' palace, affection was never separate from calculation. You sit now on a cushioned bench, looking out through a carved screen at the Nile beyond. A river that gave life. A river that took it. Somewhere beyond the palace, fishermen are beginning their day. But here, in this corridor of silks and soft steps, the daughters still drift like incense. Unremembered. Unrecorded. Unseen, but never unimportant. It's midday now, though the palace light remains drowsy and indirect. Outside, the sun is fierce, baking the pink sandstone walls until they glow like embers. But here, inside the deeper corridors, everything is cooled by shadows, by thick walls, and by the heavy scent of imported cedarwood. You find yourself at a wide colonnade overlooking the guest courtyard. Only, these aren't guests in the usual sense. They are brides. Foreign princesses. Political brides. Daughters of faraway kings who now sleep in Egypt, speak in Egypt, dream in Egypt, but were never meant to belong here. Tonight, we're talking about diplomacy beneath mosquito nets. You've entered the chambers of the foreign queens. They arrive in caravans. With golden chariots, camels, crates of tribute, entire entourages of cooks, nurses, translators, and sometimes, guards who never return home. When a war ends, or even just pauses, it often ends with a wedding. Not in a church. Not even in a temple. But in the court of Pharaoh, with a crown of lapis lazuli and a contract signed with ink, oil, and implication. You remember the name of one in particular. The Princess of Hutti. Her name wasn't written often in Egyptian records. That was on purpose. The pharaoh's scribes were selective with memory. But her arrival was historic. Because she was the daughter of Egypt's greatest enemy. The Battle of Kadesh. A clash of chariots and ego between Ramses II and the Hittites. Both sides claimed victory. Both lost too many men. Both needed a way to save face. So they wrote history differently. And then? They got married. Ramses took the Hittite princess as his wife. Some say two princesses, depending on how you read the treaties. Their arrival was chronicled with formalities, feasts, and just a little reluctance from the home crowd. Because nothing says, "We're at peace now." Quite like sleeping beside someone who once sent assassins to your borders. You walk past a painted relief of the marriage procession. The princess stands tall, her face angular and foreign. Her robes are heavier, layered, patterned in ways no Egyptian queen would ever choose. But her eyes? Her eyes say, "I see you." She had to learn fast. The language, the customs, the palace etiquette. But make no mistake, she wasn't a victim. She was a representative. Her every smile was a diplomatic signal. Her every child? A potential bridge between kingdoms. And if her influence could secure peace, she wielded it with both hands. Foreign brides were kept slightly apart from the rest of the harem. Not locked away, but buffered. Their chambers were near the diplomatic scribes. Near the guards. Near the exit. Just in case. Some wives resented them. Others befriended them, temporarily. But all of them watched. Because no one knew what the foreign queens were really here for. Peace? Espionage? A second chance? Or perhaps, revenge. There's an odd little story passed down among court attendants. One foreign queen, a princess of Mitanni, once requested a specific spice from her homeland. It took months to arrive. When it did, she shared it during a banquet. Everyone complimented it. 3 weeks later, a border negotiation mysteriously stalled. Coincidence? Maybe. But from then on, no shared dishes were allowed in the harem without approval from a priest. The recipe has since been lost. But the story? Still lingers. You step into one of the guest suites. It's cooler here, The walls are painted not with lotus flowers, but with strange, geometric symbols, glyphs from a northern language. On a low shelf rests a statue of Ishtar, the goddess of love and war. Not Egyptian, but tolerated. Because the pharaoh understood one thing very well. A happy foreign queen is a quiet boarder. And yet some of them didn't stay quiet. One, according to rare scrolls, demanded to be part of religious processions. Another refused to wear Egyptian linen, insisting on wool, even in the desert heat. One carved her name in her native tongue onto the back of her chamber wall. It was found centuries later, still angry. You read it now, traced into the stone with something sharp. I am not forgotten. I remember my name. Historians still argue over how much influence these women had. Were they pawns? Or queens in their own right? It's hard to say. But the fact that they were documented at all, that statues were carved, that treaties mention them, that scrolls survive with their handwriting, suggests they weren't invisible. They were watching. They were learning. And sometimes they were the smartest person in the room. Even when the room pretended not to notice. You sit now beside a small stone basin, still filled with ancient dust. It was once used to wash the feet of foreign brides as they entered the palace for the first time. The ritual was symbolic, washing away the old life. But you wonder, did they ever really forget? Or did they simply wait? Wait until Ramses whispered in their own language. Wait until the court needed their vote. Wait until Egypt remembered that peace, too, has a price. The palace is louder tonight. Not with music or feasting, but with tension. You hear it in the pacing of sandaled feet, the quick taps of scribes copying something urgent, and the not-so-quiet whispers of, "Did you hear?" echoing from the servant corridors. You've been here long enough to know what that means. Something has happened. Or is about to. So you do what any survivor of Ramses' court would do, you follow the gossip. You round a corner and nearly bump into two linen-draped girls balancing amphorae of pomegranate wine. They're wide-eyed, whispering in a dialect you barely catch. She said her tongue was too sharp. And now her cushions are gone. He didn't even look at her today. You don't need details. You know the genre. Another wife has fallen from favor. And the sharks are already circling. In the royal harem, disgrace doesn't look like banishment or public punishment. It looks like a room moved farther from the center. A cooling of glances. A tray of fruits that arrives just a little too late. A favorite hairdresser reassigned. Temporarily. Here, punishment isn't loud. It's polite. Deadly polite. You follow the trail of murmurs to a corridor near the inner chambers. The air smells sweet, but sickly so. Like perfume masking something rotten. And there it is. A scroll left unrolled on a low table. You glance at it. Carefully. It's a letter. Or a copy of one. Between a wife and her sister in the north. What catches your eye isn't what it says, but the margin notes. Smeared. Hastily made. Almost like someone read it, and added to it. She dares compare her chambers to Nefertari's, says she deserves the same offerings, claims her son is destined for Aten's light. A scandal? A joke? Or worse, a boast? Because in this palace, a boast is a threat. You remember what a scribe told you your second night here, whispered through the lattice screen. When a wife starts comparing herself to the great wife, she's already packing her bags. And sure enough, this one is already halfway gone. No ceremony. No procession. Just a closed door, and a note left behind in someone else's handwriting. Gossip in Ramses' court isn't idle. It's a currency, a weapon, a performance art. The wives use it the way courtiers use gold, generously, but with purpose. Want someone removed? Start a rumor she's talking to a foreign official. Want someone exiled? Let slip that she cursed the pharaoh's sandals, an actual superstition, by the way. Want someone gone forever? Imply her child might not really be Ramses. The walls themselves seem to inhale these rumors and exhale them louder. One servant hears. Then another. Then, somehow, the high priest is asking about linen orders from Nubia. How strange. There's an old story, barely preserved, about a concubine named Ipiet. She was said to be stunning. Not just beautiful, unsettlingly so. A silence followed her when she walked. Even the birds near her garden reportedly grew quieter. But then, one day, her statue vanished from the court. No ceremony. No explanation. Just gone. Some say she spoke ill of a prince. Others say she knew too much about the temple revenues. One version claims she wasn't even a wife, but a spy from the north, embedded for years. But the best story? The best one says she vanished on purpose, that she left the palace in disguise and returned home with scrolls hidden in her sandals. Is it true? Who knows? But in this palace, the line between truth and rumor is as thin as papyrus, and twice as flammable. You pass a group of wives sitting together, their robes soft, their laughter softer. They're discussing a new arrival. A girl from the Delta. Pretty. Clever. Quiet. Too quiet. She reads too much, one says. She never laughs, another adds. She watches everything, whispers a third. The tone shifts. Their eyes narrow. They've decided. This girl is dangerous. So they'll destroy her. With compliments, of course. In Ramses' court, gossip isn't childish. It's strategy. It's how you disarm a rival without ever raising your voice. How you rewrite history before the scribes do. And how you ensure that, long after you're gone, someone still remembers your version of events. Even if it isn't true. Especially if it isn't true. You find yourself back in your chamber now. The lamp is low. The air is still. But even now, in the silence, you can hear it, just faintly. The sound of voices behind the walls. Telling stories. Swapping secrets. Editing the truth. The pharaoh may rule the land. But the harem? The harem rules the narrative. And in this place, narrative is everything. You wake to bells. Not loud ones, just the soft clang of bronze chimes struck by a servant girl with no expression on her face. The sound drifts through the halls like a warning, or an invitation. It means a priest has entered the inner court. It means something sacred is happening. But around here, sacred doesn't always mean holy. Sometimes it just means too dangerous to question. You gather your robe, step out quietly, and follow the echo of bells. You're about to see what happens when religion meets royal suspicion, and when temples aren't just for gods, but for queens. The temple of Isis sits just beyond the harem walls, technically separate, officially sacred, but in reality, deeply intertwined with everything that happens under Ramses' roof. You approach the temple's courtyard. It smells of frankincense, beeswax, and something floral you can't quite place. The kind of scent that makes your throat tighten and your thoughts feel slow. The priestesses move like ghosts. No sandals. No speech. They tend to the altar, feed the fires, write the offerings into neat scrolls. And standing just outside the inner sanctuary are two wives. Their presence isn't routine. It's ritual. One of them holds a folded cloth with an offering inside, a fig still warm from a private garden. The other clutches a scroll. And you realize this isn't a prayer. It's a petition. In Ramses' Egypt, temples weren't neutral. They were power centers. Priests controlled the calendar, interpreted omens, blessed coronations, and, most importantly, legitimized queens. If a wife wanted to secure her place, or her son's future, she needed more than perfume and pillow talk. She needed the gods on her side. Or at least, the priests. You sit near a painted wall that tells a curious story, a queen presenting a child to a god, arms raised, eyes serene. But when you read the inscription, something's off. The queen's name has been chiseled out. Not clumsily, but with surgical precision. A redacted prayer. You look closer. Another name, more recently etched, replaces it in smaller, neater text. Someone changed history. Right there in stone. There's a story the temple attendants sometimes whisper, when they think no one's listening. About a wife who brought an offering too generous: silver bracelets, Nubian spices, an entire goose roasted in honey. The priest accepted it with a nod. 3 weeks later, her son was given a new title: heir apparent. Coincidence? Not in Egypt. Of course, a year after that, the same priest fell mysteriously ill. His replacement? Sponsored by another wife. The goose was never seen again. Religion in the palace is a delicate negotiation. On the surface, it's about Ma'at, the divine order, the cosmic balance. Pharaoh is the living god, and his wives are extensions of that divinity. But underneath? It's marketing. Spiritual branding. One wife commissions a statue of herself as Hathor. Another sponsors a festival to the goddess Mut, making sure her name is sung between every chant. Another funds the restoration of a shrine, with just enough modification that it resembles her own garden pavilion. Subtle. Clever. Strategic. There's even a ritual called the Night of Naming, performed during lunar eclipses. The wives stay up all night, offering incense, whispering prayers, placing amulets beneath their pillows. The goal? To receive a dream name, a secret title blessed by the gods, which can be used as divine proof of your child's legitimacy. Some say it worked. Some say it was nonsense. But everyone participated. Because in Ramses' world, a dream was as valuable as a royal decree, if enough people believed it. You pass by a room filled with votive offerings. Miniature statues. Scarabs with tiny inscriptions. Even a comb, its teeth carved into the shape of cobras. Each object holds a story, a plea. Let my son speak before the Pharaoh. Let my name be remembered in the temple. Let her be forgotten. Yes. Even curses have a home in this house of gods. The priestesses know this. They don't intervene. They just record. And the gods? The gods remain silent. Historians still argue about the extent of religious manipulation in Ramses' court. Were the temples independent? Or were they tools of the throne? Was faith genuine? Or just another form of flattery? But here, standing beneath a roof painted with stars, you realize something simple. Belief and ambition weren't opposites. They were partners. Every prayer was also a plan. Every offering was also a gamble. And every sacred word was a weapon. You return to the harem just as the sun dips past the palace towers. One wife is lighting a lamp. Another is adjusting her necklace, an ankh dangling just a little lower than usual. And behind them all, the bell chimes again. Soft. Measured. Final. The gods have heard. What they do next? That's between them and the one who paid the most. The sun has slipped beneath the desert's edge. The sky is deep indigo now, and the torches lining the palace walls burn with steady, golden flames. Night doesn't bring peace in Ramses' court, it just lowers its voice. And tonight? Tonight, it's whispering something darker than usual. A servant runs past you, barefoot, carrying a clay bowl with trembling hands. A guard shifts uneasily at a corner. A midwife clutches a small amulet tighter than she should. Something happened. Something wrong. And it started in the nursery. The royal nursery isn't where you'd expect it. It's not a happy, sunlit room filled with bouncing babies and lullabies. It's a wing of its own. Guarded. Secluded. Tense. You enter cautiously, the floor beneath your feet colder than elsewhere. A breeze rustles the sheer curtains over a row of carved cradles. No sound. No wailing. No singing. That's your first clue. Because in a place with so many babies, silence is suspicious. You're told, not by anyone directly of course, that something happened to one of the children. A boy. Son of one of Ramses' mid-ranking wives. Not the heir. Not the favorite. But still royal. And now, gone. They say it was an accident. That he wandered into the courtyard where the sacred animals are kept. That no one noticed the small splash. That the screams came too late. But others whisper something stranger. Not an accident. Not exactly. Because no one expects a crocodile to be in the nursery courtyard. And no one expects it to be calm. You sit on a bench nearby, watching two nursemaids scrub a stone floor with aggressive precision. They're erasing something, blood maybe. Or guilt. One hums a lullaby under her breath, a tune meant to soothe infants. But her hands are shaking. She's been repeating the same verse for an hour. You count. 73 times. The official story is that the crocodile escaped from the temple enclosure. That the gates weren't secured. That the animal was old, sacred, barely moved. But everyone knows the real security lies in knowing who wanted it to happen. And no one wants to say it aloud. Because that would mean naming names. There's a shelf filled with tiny sandals. Dozens of pairs, all hand-stitched, soft-soled, still lined in rabbit fur for cold desert nights. Some belong to children still living. Others, like the boy, will never wear theirs again. You find his. Smaller than your hand. Worn at the toes. Marked on the side with a simple fish symbol. And now that fish has been swallowed. Here's a fact that rarely appears in inscriptions. Child mortality in ancient Egypt was common. Even in the palace. Illness, infection, accidents, they happen all the time. But sometimes death wasn't a failure of medicine. It was a message. You overhear a conversation between two servants near the water basins. Quiet. Flat. Terrified. She was smiling this morning. The mother. She asked the scribe to teach the boy to write. She said he was getting taller. She said maybe he'd visit the temple soon. You don't need them to finish the sentence. She said too much. Historians still argue about whether this particular child even existed. No name. No record. Just a faint mention in an inventory scroll. Offering of linen and figs for the son of. Then a smudge. Then nothing. Was he erased? Or was he never meant to be remembered? In Ramses' court, both mean the same thing. A nurse finally speaks to you. Briefly. She says the boy's mother hasn't left her chamber since it happened. She hasn't spoken. Hasn't eaten. She stares at the courtyard where it happened. Over and over. As if waiting for it to happen again. You ask what will become of her. The nurse shrugs. Depends whose idea it was. That's all she says. That's all she needs to say. You exit the nursery through the back corridor, passing a mural you hadn't noticed before. It shows a lioness with cubs. One is missing. Someone has scratched a mark beside her mouth. You're not sure if it's symbolic. Or just honest. And yet life in the palace continues. Feasts are prepared. Gossip floats. Perfume is applied. The pharaoh is expected to appear at sunrise for a blessing ritual. No one will mention the child. No one will ask why the pool was drained. No one will bring up the guard who hasn't been seen since yesterday. Because forgetting is safer than remembering. Especially when the memory bites. You don't remember falling asleep. But you wake in the middle of the night to a sound you can't quite place. Something between a hush and a sigh, like linen slipping across stone, or a name almost spoken. The palace is different now. Still the same gilded walls, still the same torchlit corridors, but something's missing. Or rather, someone? You step into the hallway and it feels emptier. Like a stage after the lead actress has left without a curtain call. Because tonight, a queen has vanished. Not a favorite. Not a foreign bride. Not a mystery. This one had a name everyone knew. Her titles were carved in stone. Her chamber had its own guard. Her servants were known by name. And now? Her room is silent. Her jewelry is gone. Her scent no longer lingers in the hall. You ask a servant what happened. He says nothing. Just lowers his gaze. In Ramses' court, women don't disappear loudly. They are erased with precision. First, her name is left off the morning blessing list. Then her attendants are reassigned, quietly, one by one. Then her chamber is cleaned and left open, as if awaiting renovation. Then the statues. The statues are the real sign. One afternoon, you walk past a small shrine where her figure once stood, carved beside Hathor, her face smiling. Now, the face has been chiseled flat. Still elegant. Still regal. But faceless. It's a practice the Egyptians knew well, damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. To destroy a name was to destroy a soul's journey in the afterlife. And in Ramses' palace, it was used like a scalpel. Not to kill the body, but to kill the legacy. Historians still debate the identity of one queen whose tomb was found nearly a century ago, its walls stripped of every image, every word. All that remained was a faint trace of blue pigment and a single broken bracelet. No name. No title. Just the outline of someone who had once been royal, and then wasn't. Some say she was caught in a plot. Others say she fell out of favor for something as simple as ambition. One theory? She demanded a temple of her own. And Ramses didn't like being asked. Back in the present, you pass a group of wives seated in a circle, pretending to embroider. But they aren't stitching. They're speculating. They're recalibrating the social map. Who rises, who falls, who fills the empty space left behind. Her chamber overlooks the garden now. Her son was summoned to the festival rehearsal. Her amulet changed color. That means something. No grief. No mourning. Just adjustments. Like the tide pulling back, waiting for the next wave. You take a detour past the kitchens. The cook is preparing a dish with dates and honey, her favorite, or so they say. A quiet nod of acknowledgement, maybe. Or a warning. She's gone. But the story isn't over. Because someone will be next. There's an odd little thing you notice near her old chamber. A hairpin. Simple. Ivory. No jewels. Just a small engraving at the tip, a cobra curled around an egg. You pick it up. Hold it. It feels warm, somehow. Recent. And you wonder, was this dropped by accident? Or left? Because in this palace, nothing is ever truly forgotten. Not really. Not if someone's watching. You look up and see the guard posted outside her door is missing too. In his place? A fresh plant. Papyrus. Symbol of rebirth. Or erasure. Depends on who's telling the story. You make your way to the gallery where statues of royal wives line the walls. You count. 24 faces remain. The 25th? Gone. Only the base remains, smooth clean. No name. No trace. Just enough emptiness to remind you someone was here. And that someone decided she shouldn't be anymore. And yet, even in erasure, there is memory. Even without a name, there is a gap. And gaps speak. You hear it in the silence of the wives as they pass her old chamber. You see it in the way one maid still refolds a linen shawl that should have been discarded. You feel it in the coolness of the marble where her sandals once rested. She's gone. But the palace remembers. Even if it isn't allowed to say so. You enter a tomb before you even realize it. Not a real one, not yet, but a corridor so quiet, so perfectly preserved in stillness, that it feels like the afterlife has crept forward to meet you halfway. The air is cool and dry. Too dry. Dust rises with each step, disturbed for the first time in days. Or weeks. And on every wall? Smiles. Painted ones. The kind that never blink. Never age. Never tell the truth. You've found the private mortuary wing of Ramses' palace. The section where artists work not with imagination, but instructions. Because in this place, even death has a stylist. The tomb paintings of Egypt are some of the most beautiful in the world. Vivid scenes of fishing, music, feasts, and eternal joy. But what most people don't know is that many of those scenes were carefully curated by the people themselves. Wives sat with scribes. Scribes sat with artists. Artists sat with priests. And together they designed the afterlife like a personalized Instagram feed, filtered, flawless, aspirational. You pass one such chamber now. On the wall, a queen reclining beside a pool, surrounded by children, servants, and fragrant trees. It looks serene. But you know too much now. You know her son never lived past age 6. You know the pool was dry when she died. You know her real chamber faced a wall, not a garden. This is what she wanted remembered. And who are we to argue with memory? A few walls later, you see another mural, this one unfinished. The background is painted, but the figures are only outlined. One woman seated. 2 children. An offering table. But no faces. No names. Just silence where intention once lived. Why? No one knows. Maybe she died too soon. Maybe her rival paid the artist not to finish. Maybe she changed her mind. Historians still debate why so many elite tombs were left incomplete. Money? Politics? Divine intervention? The answer is probably simple. Someone stopped believing she'd be remembered. You round a corner into a sealed chamber, the kind only opened once, for the briefest moment, when a body is laid inside. There's no body now. Just a faint residue of cedar oil and natron. And on the far wall? A painting of Ramses. Smiling. Holding hands with two of his wives. One is clearly Nefertari. The other, you don't recognize. No name. No crown. Just a woman drawn in gold and rose pigment, gazing up at her pharaoh like he's her sunrise. You lean closer. There, just beneath her feet, someone had begun to carve a name. It's been scratched out. Deeply. Deliberately. And over it, another word has been etched, beloved. That's not a name. That's a replacement. Someone refused to let her disappear completely. Even if they couldn't save the letters, they saved the meaning. You sit down on the stone bench nearby. The tomb workers once sat here, too. Some carving. Some resting. Some whispering about the queens whose faces they were immortalizing. Too tall, one might have said. Fix her chin, said another. She didn't really smile like that. They were artists, yes, but also editors. And in the royal court, editing is its own kind of power. There's a quiet fact most tourists never hear. Some queens commission multiple tombs. One for the record. One for themselves. And one, just in case. You find one of these now. A hidden chamber. No decoration. No paint. Just stone and shadow. And a small inscription etched by hand, not by royal decree, but maybe by a servant, or a grieving lover. She waited here. No name. No date. Just a sentence. A whole life, reduced to a pause. You make your way back toward the light, but something holds you at the threshold. A final mural. It shows Ramses again. This time older. Seated on a throne, surrounded not by wives, but by statues of them. Lifelike. Beautiful. Frozen. And Ramses? He's not smiling. He's looking away. Toward the horizon. As if already forgetting. As if already moving on. You step into the air once more. The wind feels warmer now. Brighter. But a little less innocent. You've seen the machinery behind the memory. You've watched the queens craft their afterlives like mosaics, choosing which moments to keep, which smiles to paint, which truths to bury. And now you understand something the tombs never say. In Ramses' court, you didn't die when your heart stopped. You died when your name was no longer spoken. The sky outside is the color of obsidian now, streaked with hints of copper where torchlight hits the clouds. A slow wind passes over the palace roof like a breath held too long. And beneath it all? The court holds its breath too. Because Ramses is sleeping. Not dead. Just old. Just quieter. And everyone inside these walls knows exactly what that means. The throne is beginning to creak. And in the space between breaths, between bedtime and final breath, the whispers have begun to turn into plans. You walk the halls and notice the change. Servants no longer gossip idly. They listen. Scribes no longer rush, they wait. The wives still smile, still dress, still kneel at the correct angle. But now, They glance sideways just a moment too long. They hesitate before answering a question. They pause before saying Ramses' name, just to see who's watching. Because the game has changed. Ramses is still king, but his grip is loosening. And everyone is already preparing for the chapter where he isn't. This is when the real danger begins. When a kingdom starts to mourn its king before he's gone. You step into a gathering chamber you haven't visited before. Smaller. Circular. No thrones. Just cushions arranged in arcs, bowls of wine mostly untouched. 3 wives are seated. 2 have sons. 1 has already lost hers. They speak quietly. Tactfully. Sharpening words like knives. He still favors Merneptah. He hasn't summoned anyone in 3 days. The high priest says the next festival may be postponed. Or cancelled. You feel it in the air. The shift. Not sudden. Not loud. Just settling, like silt on the Nile. The idea that Ramses is no longer immortal. Historians still debate the final decade of Ramses' reign. He ruled for over 66 years. Outlived many of his children. Possibly suffered from arthritis, dental issues, even hardening of the arteries. There are letters hinting at diminished appearances. Delayed audiences. More rituals performed on his behalf, rather than by him. But in the palace? They didn't wait for confirmation. They started moving. A wife might bribe a priest to reinterpret a dream. A son might request more time in the temple, posing as pious while building alliances. A servant might suddenly change sides. Or disappear. You pass one now, an older woman, eyes cloudy with age, cleaning an amulet that belonged to a queen long dead. She glances up. Whispers. They're practicing their grief now. You ask what she means. She smiles. They cry when he's not looking. Then dry their tears when he enters. And the Pharaoh? Still here. Still present. But present like the last flame on a long candle. Wives take turns sitting near him now. Not out of love, but out of strategy. If you're holding his hand when he passes. If your son is closest. If the priests already know your name. That changes everything. There's a story, only half recorded, about one wife who tried to hurry the transition. She brought Ramses a bomb. A sleeping draft. Nothing deadly. Just heavy. Strong. He slept for 2 days. And when he awoke groggy, he reassigned her servants. She was never seen again. Some say she was sent to a monastery. Others say her tomb was carved while she still breathed. Either way, she bet too early. And lost. Now, as you walk past the great columned gallery, you notice the musicians practicing slower pieces. Lamentations. Procession songs. Funeral hymns, not yet official, but rehearsed. Just in case. One harpist drops a note. She doesn't apologize. Just starts again. She's been told to be ready. So has the embalmer. So has the sculptor commissioned to carve Ramses' funerary cartouche. It's begun. The slow, elegant dance of dying. And every step is watched. You find yourself at the edge of the harem garden. It's late. The lotuses are closed. The frogs are quiet. You sit on a carved bench and watch the night flicker against a brazier. A servant places fruit beside a statue of the pharaoh, his younger likeness, chiseled in perfect symmetry. You notice something odd. The fruit is unripe. A message? A mistake? or just a symbol. That time has caught up. Even with the God King. Behind you, two women walk slowly down the path. They don't speak. But one reaches for the other's hand, just for a moment. Not in friendship. Not in alliance. Just to steady herself. Even in a palace of queens, grief is still grief. Even when it's timed. Even when it's useful. The night deepens. And somewhere, behind gold-draped curtains, Ramses breathes. Still alive. Still king. But for how long? And when he finally sleeps the sleep of Osiris, who will wake? Whose name will be first on the temple's lips? Whose hand will rest on the crook and flail? You don't know. No one does. But everyone's already whispering like they do. It's nearly morning. But this is not a dawn like the others. The air is heavy, thick, still, expectant. No birds sing. No water-bearers shuffle past your corridor. The courtyards have been swept, but no one walks them. And for the first time since you arrived, there is no music. No harp. No laughter. Not even a whisper. Because Ramses the Great is gone. You don't hear it from a herald. No trumpets. No ceremony. Just a silence that settles into your skin like fine dust. You feel it first in the way the guards stand, too straight. In the way a priestess bows, too long. In the way the wives pause mid-step, mid-breath, mid-thought, as if even their ambitions have caught in their throats. The palace has not yet cried. But it has stopped moving. And that says everything. You walk to the center of the harem court. The morning sun glints off a low pool, untouched. Someone has left lotus blossoms floating there, white, unbruised, freshly placed. Around you, the wives begin to appear. One by one. No wailing. No drama. Just presence. And each of them carries something. A token. A memory. An offering. Some clutch scarabs. Others wear the same perfume they did when they first met him. One woman carries a sandal, its leather cracked and faded, his, perhaps. Or hers. You don't ask. They gather like constellations around a star that has already collapsed. Still radiant. But gone. You sit beneath a sycamore tree whose shade has cooled this court for generations. And you watch. Watch as the women say goodbye. Some say nothing at all. Some speak softly in the old tongue, the private language shared only in bedrooms and dreams. One simply places a folded cloth on the step and walks away. Historians record the day of Ramses' death with dignity. They write of the national mourning, of the royal procession, of the grand tomb cut deep into the Valley of the Kings. But they do not write this: that a wife fainted beside a perfume jar, that a servant lit the incense too early and cried silently behind a pillar, that one woman, who had never spoken to you, turned and whispered, "I thought he would never leave." Not with anger. Not with relief. Just disbelief. Because gods are not supposed to die. Not the ones who held your gaze. Not the ones who chose your child. Not the ones who built your identity like a monument. And yet, even as he passes into eternity, the world begins to move again. Slowly. Delicately. The priesthood dispatches messengers. The eldest living son, Merneptah, has already been named. His sandals are being polished. His likeness is being chiseled onto fresh stele. And the wives? They adjust. Realign. A new map begins to form, drawn not in ink, but in posture, in silence, in which direction each woman turns when she hears the word Pharaoh. You walk the hall once more. The same one you entered what feels like centuries ago. It's different now. Not darker. Just thinner. As though the palace itself is exhaling. You pass the nursery. Empty. The gallery of statues. Rearranged. The scribe's desk. Covered in scrolls, some opened, some sealed, some waiting for the next name to inscribe. And you realize, Ramses is gone. But the harem remains. The women remain. And their stories? They were never just footnotes. They were the plot. You step outside as the sun lifts over the horizon. A soft breeze brushes your skin. Not hot. Not cool. Just enough. You close your eyes. The scent of lotus. Of ink. Of oil that's burned all night. And beneath it? Memory. You're tired now. The kind of tired that lives in the bones. But it's not an empty tired. It's full. Of names you never knew. Of glances never recorded. Of rivalries so quiet they could outlive a dynasty. Of women who waited behind curtains and prayers and perfume. And carved their presence into eternity anyway. You lie back on the smooth stone. Feel the warmth begin to seep in. Let your breath slow. Let your muscles loosen. Let it all blur. The laughter. The arguments. The fragrance of power. You don't need to remember every detail. Only that it mattered. That they mattered. That, somewhere beneath the tombs and behind the golden masks, history was written in whispers, in silk, in sacrifice. And now it sleeps. Just like you. Just like Ramses. Just like the stories no one dared write down. Not until now. End of script. Sweet dreams.